This is the voice of the New York Football Giants, Bob Papa, and you are listening to the best throughout Europe, the Big Blue UK and Ireland podcast.
Welcome back, Giants fans, to the latest edition of the Big Blue UK and Ireland podcast, proudly in association, as always, with Andy's Man Club. Lads, remember, it is okay to talk. In this episode, we are once again 100% British and 100% Giants. For the second week in a row, you have the joy of me hosting, and in a repeat of last week, as we discussed at the end of last week's episode, Aaron and Shane are back with me as we decide to look at how the Giants stack up defensively against the NFC East. How are we doing, boys?
Yeah, really good today. Good to see the Giants take the field today for the first time, and it's the most interesting practice session of the entire season. The first one because it is the first one. And by the end of training camp, you just kind of look for the stats and look for the, thing. But anything you get today is like, oh, what's going on? What's going on? But thankfully, no injuries out of camp, and we'll get on to better things over the next couple of weeks. But yeah, it can almost taste the season now.
Yeah, I mean, we only did an episode last week, but I feel like that episode was like 2 weeks ago. I don't know if it's just been a slow week or something. It just feels like last time we were talking this was like weeks ago. Once again, obviously I'm on. Kev's not on. Still not heard anything from Kev about the rumours. He doesn't want to be on the air when I'm on. I'm trying my best to try and find that out and letting people know. And give a shout out to Steve as well. He's actually joined from the start this week. Like, you'd love to see it.
Shane's just stirring the pot straight away as soon as we get on air. This might be the biggest off-season story of them all, is the Shane and Kev potential beef. We're looking at Josh Norman versus Odell Beckham from back in the day here.
Me and Kev will have to have meet up soon and have a photo took with each other shaking hands just to be like, look, there's no beef.
Amazing. There's a fair bit-ish to get through. Obviously, we've got the return of the news section coming back this week because camp is upon us. However, before we begin, if you're watching this on YouTube, X or Facebook, please do get involved in the comments, as some lovely people already have done. Like this video, subscribe if you aren't already, hit the notification bell. Aaron's already preempting the 5-star reviews for our audio and pod listeners. Obviously, rate us on your podcast platform of choice. It really does mean a lot, and it helps us improve, which is good. Steve's already moaning about catching strays, but like Malik Neighbours, at least you caught something during practice today, because none of the other wide receivers did. Let's talk about training camp on that note, because training camp is here, boys. We are in the proper off-season. No OTAs, no mini camps, nothing like that. Proper off-season. Games are mere weeks away. Let's take stock of everything that has happened in the last 48 hours, because there was a fair bit that happened yesterday. We started with a new face arriving as the Giants signed safety Kevon Wallace, who had been part of the Giants minicamp last month in June. Wallace was selected in the 4th round in 2020 by the Eagles and spent 3 seasons in Philly before bouncing around the Cardinals and Titans 2 years ago, and most recently the Seahawks, where he was in 2024. 71 career games, 19 starts. He has 168 total tackles, 1 quarterback hit, 1 forced fumble, 1 recovery, 8 pass breakups, and 1 interception. In a corresponding move, safety Anthony Johnson Jr. was waived with an injury designation, which makes no surprise. Aaron, on that one, just very quickly, we all kind of spoke about Anthony Johnson Jr. a few weeks ago when we were previewing the safeties, and we said that safety 4 spot is up for grabs. Do you think Wallace is somebody who can come in and potentially take that 4th spot?
So, I mean, it's a player that's obviously been on the radar for a little while, but that 4th safety spot, I wouldn't count on anything until we're suiting up against the Commanders. I think Shane mentioned it in his press conference today that we're the number 3 on the waiver priority. So on cut down day, with any priority free agents out there, or they go to waivers that don't make teams, whether they're cap casualties or whether they just don't make the 53. We're 3rd in line. So I wouldn't be surprised if that story runs right until game 1.
Yeah, you're probably not wrong. It is nice to see that there's a more veteran presence there, though. Somebody who's actually had physical snaps. 71 games is quite a lot for a player who was signed in 2020. Obviously, another player who seems to have done the NFC East shuffle, which we seem to be seeing quite a lot at the moment with a lot of players here, there, and everywhere. We're going to speak about a few Giants or ex-Giants who have decided to go across to filthy Philadelphia. So obviously we've now got one here who via Tennessee, Arizona and Seattle has made his way to the Giants from there. The Giants have also moved Andrew Thomas and Eric Gray to the PUP or physically unable to perform list. And linebacker Victor Dubakaji. God, I've done pronunciations for the ones later. Didn't do one for that one, did I? He was placed on the non-football injury list. Shane, just quickly on that, we've spoken quite a lot about Eric Gray and how we think this is like last chance saloon for him. That's not going to help, is it? The fact that he's not even going to be involved in training camp when rumours are that from a special teams perspective, Dante Miller might actually be in front of him.
No, I mean, I think it helps us as fans in reassuring us that he's probably not going to be on the roster. But now, it's not an ideal move. I think it's only a matter of time, to be honest with you, until he's kind of let go, and it's going to come as no surprise to anybody. We've kind of all called it from pretty much day 1, really. I mean, we especially have to. I mean, we went into the draft saying we'd like to draft another running back. When we did draft another running back, it was like, okay, well, whose time's potentially limited that's on the Giants roster at that position? And Eric Gray was probably the first one that you kind of circled and stood out because he's done nothing since he's entered the league for us, really.
Aaron, is the unmute there from you indicative of a point there, or
no? Just making sure I was awake.
Right, and then we also had a press conference from Joe Shane and Brian Dable today. Obviously, there was a practice session that was open to fans. As any of you who have been on X today will have seen the myriad of reports, videos, people getting annoyed already, people throwing doom and gloom around, but it's practice 1, and because it is practice 1 and because it was a red zone practice where not a lot really happened and the defense are backed up and the offense are going to be rusty, we're not going to go through it play by play, so we'll literally just look at the highlights from the presser earlier. So Neighbours is back in practice after missing most of the off-season program or all of the off-season program before today with a toe injury. Neighbours did say afterwards that the toe is feeling good and that they've got a team kind of keeping an eye on him, and he's not sure whether he'll need surgery, but we're going to keep an eye on it. I'm not too concerned. I think if he's ready to go, he's ready to go. Obviously, we also saw that there was a myriad of other players who had sat out the sort of pre-off-season minicamp and OTAs, like Darius Alexander, Cam Scatterbo, who knows? They are all full participants now as well. It's only really Thomas and Gray who are on that list who are not. Speaking of Andrew Thomas, though, Joe Shane was asked about his availability, and he did say that Andrew Thomas should be ready to go week 1. They sound pretty confident. It doesn't sound like it's a 100% confirmation, but we're getting close. There was an interesting question that was put to Joe Shane. I'm interested to get your boys' views on this after the last point. But he was asked if he had built a playoff caliber team. Now, I can't remember who it was who asked it, but recently during the Titans off-season press conference, they asked, do you have a Super Bowl winning team here? Obviously, whoever this reporter was today has decided to temper expectations a little bit and just go for the playoffs. Joe Shane's reply was, my expectation is that we have a competitive roster. So I'll be interested to know if you think that's just him tempering expectations or it's just Joe Shane being Joe Shane with a typical answer. Brian Dable was asked about the QB position, and he said these guys would be out here competing, but Russ is our starter. So that's the first official confirmation we've had that Russell Wilson will be the Giants starter. He did also mention that it's behind him that where the competition will be between Jameis Winston, Jackson Dart, and Tommy DeVito. I don't have the notes down here, but there was also a really interesting answer from Dable where he was asked about what he kind of looks for during these early off-season practices. It was a very long-winded answer, which is very unlike Brian Dable. He's normally very concise and tries to keep his cards close to his chest. But essentially what he was saying is that when it comes to the rookies, he's looking for somebody who won't make the same mistake twice. He's looking for somebody who's smart enough to recognize a mistake and then correct it going forward. And I thought it was a really, really good answer. We've retweeted it earlier, so have a look on our socials. You'll probably find it in there. But Shane, my expectation is that we have a competitive roster. What do you sort of make of that? Is that a nothing answer from Joe Shane, or is that just him tempering expectations?
I think it's probably kind of what, speak for myself at least, what Giants fans want to see. Because, we're not saying we're going to turn around and have a 10-win year this year. We're not saying that we're going to expect to make the playoffs. All we want to see is competitive team. We didn't have a competitive product on the field last year. So, for me, that's all I want to see is just. I just want to see us compete, get more wins than we had last year. If we happen to make the playoffs, then it's a bonus, but I'm not kind of anticipating it. The main thing is you want to see competitive football, you want to see growth in Jackson Dart, and you hopefully want to see Dart on the field towards the back end of the season and see why they decided to move up for him and decide that he was their guy. So that's the main things that I'm looking for personally.
Aaron?
Yeah, I know people get frustrated with the kind of forward defense and a standard block with the kind of answers that we get from the front office and everything. But there's been some horror shows around the league with some of these comments. Don't know if you caught over in Dallas with the whole Micah Parsons and Jerry Jones going on some sort of rant about not wanting to give big contracts and guaranteed money, and and that players that might not fulfill contracts, and we've been burnt here. And you're like, well, you've got a guy who's probably the best player in the league, and he's probably been in his position, and probably ever since he walked on the field for you, he's under his fifth year. He's criminally underpaid versus what other people get, and you're giving answers like that. We saw the Super Bowl one in for the Titans and things like that. So, to be perfectly honest, like, what do you want him to say? Competitive roster. He's keeping his options open, his cards close to the table. And if he does get a 10-win season and we do make the playoffs, he can kind of go, well, I told you it was going to be competitive. If it doesn't quite live up to expectations, he can say, well, we've made a step forward, and and if it isn't competitive, he's probably out of a job anyway.
Yeah, very, very true. It's just standard kind of line of questioning from the New York media, isn't it, really? I won't name names, but there was a certain beat writer who decided to put out an article, yesterday, talking about Jackson Dart needs to learn away from the drama that is the Giants organization. And it's just like, well, we haven't even started. How can we have drama? You can't really get into it in that sense as a yet. We're halfway through the season and everything's crumbling. Maybe that's a headline you can put out there, but I think that's just a bit fishy at the moment, trying to fish.
I think I saw the same beat writer write something else about, is there a friction between Dable and Shane as well, and that they're not best buddies anymore, and the knives are coming out very quickly against each other. And I think these guys are pretty close. I think their families are pretty close. I think they meet up throughout the summer doing family stuff. So I don't know. I just think people got to find something to write about and make clicks in a quiet period, and if that's all they can write about, then things haven't gone too badly this off season. We haven't got an injury crisis or a contract dispute or a player facing some kind of suspension for off the field conduct. It's as off seasons go, touch wood, and where we are at the start of training camp, it's been relatively drama free and pretty exciting as a Giants fan, with the kind of influx of our rookie class and where we're heading. So if that's all they've got to write about, carry on.
Yeah, that's it's very, very true. I guess we should probably get into the main part of this episode. For those who watched the episode last week, you'll know the format. For those that didn't, we are going to have a look and be ranking the 4 teams in the NFC East. So the Cowboys, the Eagles, the Commanders, and the Giants. At the different positional groups. We have defensive tackle / defensive end. It's really more defensive tackle because obviously there's way too much crossover with defensive end and edge rusher. But we then also have edge rusher, linebacker, safety, and cornerback, as you can see at the bottom. We'll do it the same way as last week. I'll read out the different units from the teams, and then we'll do it in a rotation where we each give our rankings a little bit of flavour behind it, and then we'll see how aligned or misaligned we are. Last week we were pretty good, I think. I think generally we had the same sort of ebb and flow.
This week
could be interesting. We were talking just before we start this now. We were talking before we started, and there's a couple that are slightly obvious, but there are a couple that were really difficult this week. So I'll be interested to see. We're going to start off, like I said, with defensive tackle / defensive end. For those who are watching this, you can see the lineups at the bottom. For your audio listeners, I'll read it out now. So the Giants, as we well know, Dexter Lawrence, Raheem Nunez-Roches, Roy Robertson-Harris, Darius Alexander, Jeremiah Ledbetter in the smallest font possible because we have the longest names for all of our defensive tackles out of any of these units. The Eagles, Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis. I'm going to refer to my pronunciation sheet for this one. Moro Ajuma, apparently. Ajuma. Ty Robinson and Byron Young. Then for the Cowboys, you've got Osa Odighiwusa. You've then got Marzi Smith, Jay Toya, Solomon Thomas, and Tommy Akingsbescott. Who knows? Commanders, you've got Javon Kinlaw, Darren Payne, Jazar Newton, Eddie Goldman, and Shelton Day. Shane, do you want to kick us off with this one? Offensive tackle, offensive tackle, defensive tackle.
Yeah, I mean, we can do. So I've gone. This is going to be fun. So I've gone for Eagles number 1.
Eagles 1.
I've gone Giants 2. I've got Washington at 3 and Dallas at 4. The reason I got the Giants at 2 is, I mean, for me, Giants and Commanders were quite close to each other, to be honest with you. I think it's one of them ones where you could have tossed a coin. The reason why the Giants weren't number 1, they might have the best defensive tackle in professional football right now. But one of the things I was taking into consideration with this is, well, what is it behind that player as well? If you want to play with 2D tackles, or you want to play with him at tackle and then you have the two ends in a 3-4. If he was to get out injured, what does the depth and the backup look like? And I just don't think it looks as solid as what the Eagles do. I mean, Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, two elite talents. I love Torrey Robinson coming out of Nebraska, and even Byron Young out of Tennessee really stood out to me. So I just think, the Eagles starters and their depth chart is kind of pretty damn good. And then, like I say, for 2 and 3, it was either Giants or Commanders, and I just opted to go for Giants just because, like I say, they do have the best defensive tackle in the league right now, even though I probably do prefer a little bit of the depth for the NFC East, for the Commanders. But I think, Javon Kinlaw's starting to get on a little bit, and Deron Payne's as well. I love Johnny Newton last year. So, like I say, if one of you guys say you've got Commanders at 2 and the Giants at 3, I'm not going to be thinking, yeah, you're miles off there. I could easily agree with it. And then kind of at number 4, also Digizua, Mazzy Smith, not too bad. Mazzy Smith out of Michigan as a player I knew quite a lot about. Solomon Thomas has never really lived up to the hype of the number 3 overall pick all those years ago, where he's been a bit of a journeyman now. So that's why I've got K-Boys at 4, just because I'm not a massive fan of their starters, nor the depth that they've got behind as well.
Aaron, you might as well carry it on. I think you said Eagles at 1.
No, I don't have Eagles at 1. I do have the last week. It was just automatic pilot. So
okay.
No,
it was reference to the fact that every single one last week was Eagles at 1. Yeah.
Yeah. So although Eagles 1, Giants 2 does sound like a good football score, because it means we've won the game, right? So, no, I have the Giants at 1, and I just think I've gone the other way to Shane. We've got by far and away the best player in the league at that position. Certainly as a nose, as a dominant force, and what that opens up for your edge guys, what it does in your run game. We saw how devastating it was when he wasn't on the field to our defensive line. It just showed up. I think he's he's a however many time Pro Bowl now. He's an All Pro. He's going to be top 20 in the NFL, top 100. Him plus whoever you can find next to him, and I think we've done. We've spent a little bit of money bringing a Robson Harris in. We've spent some draft capital with Darius Alexander coming in. Interestingly, you get this kind of flip flop with defensive linemen on a passing down, long passing down. I think Golston's going to come in and play the 3 tech and give a really formidable pass rush off the front. You're not going to see him in. You're not going to see him in kind of first and second down or short yardage, and you'd have to, Roy Robertson Harris or Nacho will come in and fill that kind of void. I think that's better than what the Eagles have. I think Carter had a brilliant rookie season, and it is up there as probably the next best player on this page. For D-line in the division, but he's not on the same caliber as Dex. And then I think they've got something to address. Obviously, they lost Milton Williams in free agency. In fact, it's going to be a kind of a common theme tonight, is where their offense retained a lot of players, and it was clear that they were number 1 at all those positions. On the defense, they've had some losses, and it is harder to kind of put the Eagles at 1. As an automatic. And then I've actually gone Cowboys 3. I like Osa Digizua. He was their kind of guy they went to spend the money on to retain as a free agent, and which allowed Golston to leave, or allowed the Giants to come in and sweep for Golston. The depth as you go down isn't great, but I think the whole front 7 outside of Micah Parsons is challenging for the Cowboys. Commanders, I think this is their weakest part of their front 7. So they spent a bit of money on bringing Kinlaw in, but Payne had a pretty terrible season last season, stopping the run. And just as a defense, the Commanders gave up a lot of explosive plays. And I don't see how they've strengthened that, even bringing Kinlaw in. And I think, for me, again, could argue that they're third and the Cowboys fourth, but that's how I would have the Giants and Eagles interchangeable at 1 and 2, but I've gone Giants at 1. The Cowboys and Commanders 3 and 4 interchangeable, but I've gone Cowboys 3, Commanders 4.
So we are different then, on at least once on there. So I've got Giants at 1, mainly for the fact that Dexter Lawrence is arguably the best defensive lineman in the league, let alone our division, and I do think that carries a lot of weight. Nacho worries me. I've said that from literally the second the off-season started back in February until now. Nacho worries me. I do wonder if he's even in the conversation by the time we roll around to actually meaningful football. I just think Roy Robertson-Harris and the projection of Darius Alexander gives us a better backup than I think we're giving ourselves credit for. I think if Darius Alexander breaks out, he could be a bit more of an X factor for us than we actually think he is. But it's all projection. That's half the problem. But I think with a lot of these teams, you get projection. I have the Eagles at 2. I think Jalen Carter is an absolute monster, and I do really like Jordan Davis, but I think that Davis is a run stuffer. I don't know if he really offers much more outside of that. Their depth is kind of raw as well. If Davis got injured, it might not be the end of the world. I think someone probably could step in. But I think if Jalen Carter was to miss some time, they would really struggle trying to get anyone there. You could argue the same point against Dexter Lawrence and us. I am openly admitting that. And I do think, as you both have said, or as Aaron said, it is interchangeable between those two. I think that those two are clear standouts above the rest. My issue with the Commanders is that they got rid of Jonathan Allen, who obviously went in free agency, who was their standout. And Javon Kinlaw's good, but he's not Jonathan Allen. And that's their kind of linchpin. Like the Giants, run defense was iffy throughout 2024. And I just think it will continue. Johnny Newton, though, if he continues, he'll be the standout on that defensive line for me. I just feel like he's ascending pretty much in the same way that Shane and Kev kind of predicted he would before the draft last year when he was picked up. And then I've got Cowboys last. I just think that Odighizuwa is a very, very good interior player, but he is the lone standout. I know a lot of Cowboys fans don't think that Mozzie Smith has developed as they hoped, and the rest of the depth there is just completely unproven to be considered a genuine stand-in. It's very much a kind of like an unknown for them. So it's not far off. I mean, you look at the comments. James has Giants, Eagles, Commanders, Cowboys, or Cowgirls, as it says there. Holty, Eagles, Giants, Washington, Cowboys. Steve, Eagles, Giants, Commies, Cowboys also. Deck's clearly the best, but backup's not as strong as Eagles for me, says Holty, which is kind of what sort of Shane was saying when he was going through his. And Kiefer said, all the investment in the offseason, we say that we're number one. I mean, there's definitely backup investment there. And like you said, Dexter Lawrence in there. Anything to add on the D tackles before we move on to edge, which I think is going to be a more interesting conversation? Cool. Aaron, you are up first on the edge rushers. So obviously for those audio listeners, Giants have Brighton Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, Abdul Carter, and Chauncey Golston, who we're kind of putting an asterisk against because he really could line up anywhere. But the majority of comparisons for these, everyone seems to have Golston lining up as an edge, but he can, as Aaron will probably go into, play many more positions on that front line. Eagles, Nolan Smith Jr., Jalex Hunt, Joshua Uch, and an old friend, Aziz Ojolari. Cowboys have Michael Parsons, Dante Fowler Jr., Marshawn Nealand, and Devontae Ezeraku. And then the Commanders have the newly acquired Von Miller, Dorrance Armstrong. This one tripped me up earlier. Cleland Ferrell and Dietrich Wise. Aaron, give us your rankings on edge rusher.
Yeah, I'm going to enjoy this one. So I'm going to go 4-1. So at 4, I have the Commanders. It's not their strength of how they play defense anyway. They rely on the sort of blitz packages and their kind of edge defense wasn't fantastic, but Von Miller's interesting. We've seen very limited production from him from his time at the Bills, and if he's your headline asset, I think he probably struggles to make our team, certainly at the money he's on. So yeah, they're number 4. I have the Eagles at 3, and I think this is an area where they've struggled in the pass rush. They've relied on kind of playing really good coverage, and that's how they get their kind of sacks rather than having absolute amazing sacks. Edge rushes to generate those sacks. So for me, they're at number 3. I think Ojulari's a shrewd pickup. We know what he's like he is a passing edge rusher. You don't want him in the run game, but he is a phenomenal pin his ears back, go after the quarterback, and probably is their best third down edge rusher from that group. Number 2, I have the Cowboys. That added Dante Fowler Jr. into the mix, picking up Donovan Ezeraku in the draft, and Micah Parsons is one of the kind of standout. Micah Parsons, one of the standout pass rushers in the league, whether he's coming from the edge or as a linebacker, and kind of if Carter achieves 95% of what he's done in the league so far, then I think we'll be pretty happy with the capital investment that we've had at Carter at that level. There's potential for him to be better, but if you get that kind of production, now part of the reason I've got them at 2 is because there's lots of contract disputes. There's a holdout potentially. I expect them to get it done, but maybe he's a sort of guy that wants to come and play with his mate Carter next year and gets the hump and doesn't sign a new deal and plays out his 5th-year option and goes somewhere else. I don't know. That would maybe nice. At least him not terrorizing us twice a season would be nice. And then number 1, I think, our edge room, we talked about it a lot. It's the thing we're most excited for, the 2 additions here in Carter and Golston. To be fair, some of the depth guys beyond that are decent enough as well. So I like the room. Golston, I think if you've got inside, outside flexibility. Carter, you've obviously got linebacker, edge flexibility. And Burns and Kayvon. We want to see Kayvon take that step up, but as your number 2, number 3 pass rusher, he walks in as a star on any of those other teams, I think. And I've enjoyed his banter with Jermaine Illuminor. I don't know if it would make the news this week. We had some good banter with Illuminor about he's been working at Kayvon Thibodeau. He's been working on his wrestling, and Illuminor said, "I'll take you down with a single leg, easy, no problem." And I think Kayvon responded back, "Bring it on, fat boy." So they're certainly, hopefully, be interested to watch those guys at camp. But if Kayvon really does take that leap, he's had a rocket up his arse with Carter being drafted and on a 5th-year option and no new deal yet. So we'll see if he can take the leap and make this a really awesome pass rushing group. I have them as 1.
Yeah, I have it similar. I'll go 4-1 as well, seeing as that seems to be Aaron's preferred format here. I have the Eagles at 4. And the reason I have the Eagles at 4 is that I feel like they have the right build and athleticism, but they're mostly unproven. Smith and Joshua Uche are basically headlining the group, but Smith's never had more than 7 sacks in a season, and Joshua Uche has kind of come in as their free agent signing, should we say, who's going to help the line. But you look at his last 5 years of sack production since his rookie year. 1 in his rookie year, then 3, then 12 in 2022, then 3, and then 2. So he's not a proven pass rusher. And then, Ojulari's there as well. But we've all seen that Ojulari can deliver, but Ojulari can also spend a lot of time in the trainer's room injured. So they need to figure out whether they're going to be able to keep him on the field. I have the Commanders at 3. Miller's good, but he's 36, and Father Time could quite easily be catching up with him. As Aaron said, he didn't really light Buffalo on fire, so that's that. Armstrong, reliable but not flashy, hasn't hit double-digit sack in any of the 7 seasons that he's played. Backups are versatile, have a nice mix of experience and developmental guys, but no one who's really great. I have the Cowboys at 2. Parsons is elite. There's no other way around it. Whether he hits the field or doesn't due to contract disputes is another question, but you can't knock his production. But he's the make or break player for the unit. I think if he goes down, they're screwed. Fowler's good, but he's a situational pass rusher. Neelan needs a bit more development and is predominantly better in the run game. He's struggled as a pass rusher. Ezeraku's flashed in camp, but he's going to be raw to begin with. And then you look at the Giants. Brian Burns was hampered by injury all year and proved that he could produce just as well as anybody else in this list. Thibodeau hasn't broken out yet, but still manages to pick up sacks here and there and is improving, I think it's fair to say. Carter, if advertised, will cause nightmares for the offensive linemen. And Golston's kind of been forgotten about because of the fact that he's not pigeonholed to kind of one position. I just think a lot of people look over him, and he's coming off a career year. So if it all clicks, there's no doubt this is a number 1. Isn't that right, Shane?
So before we get into what, I'll ask you guys a question. So you got Giants at number 1 in D tackles because Dexter Lawrence is a beast, best player on that page, hands down. That's my iPad camera moving, by the way. That's not me. So here's a question for you. With the thinking in mind behind the Giants at 1 for D tackles, why did Dallas not make number 1 with Micah Parsons for you?
So I think so I get exactly where you're coming from, Shane, and that. So for me, it's the contract issue with what's going on behind the scene is just taking a little bit of risk into the saying that they're 1. But I do think our 2, 3, 4 is much closer to our 1 than even in what we were talking about in D-line as well. So there was clearly 2 1s in that when we were talking about D-line, and then it was you were arguing over 2nd, 3, and 4 how close they were versus the other 2nd, 3, and 4. Here, I think our 1, 2, 3, 4. Our number 2, our number 3 starts for any of the other teams as a 1 or a 2, and behind Mike Parsons, I don't think you have that. Dante Fowler, if he plays up to his maximum, I can see the argument why you would put them, into that 1 category. But I just think I wouldn't want any of the other rooms over the top of the Giants room.
Yeah, mine kind of comes down to the same argument in the terms of you look at Burns, Thibodeau, Carter, Golston, and obviously we're projecting for Carter, but there isn't another room in defensive tackle that comes close. Like the Eagles had Carter and Davis, and I get that, but Dex is a different animal. Like neither of those 2 are being spoken about in Defensive Player of the Year. Parsons, though good, I don't think he is maybe as good at edge rusher as a lot of people think he is in the terms of like the ranking of how you would look at it.
That's Parsons breaking the sack record this year. Let's.
Well, and Parson gets he doesn't get talked in the same thing as sort of Trey Hendrickson and
TJ Watt. Yeah.
But I think that's unfair in the sense of he gets tarnished with this position flexible player because people go, oh, well, he's a linebacker, he's not an edge rusher. Well, we've seen his best work come out of the edge rusher position. But hey, if you need to give him a break or you need to move him in for whatever reason, you've got a guy that's a top middle linebacker in your league, like that you think, and yeah, okay, he's a better edge rusher than maybe he is, or more, he can affect the game better as an edge rusher than he can maybe affect it as a middle linebacker. But that's positional value rather than what he can do as a player. He's up there with the best edge rushers, and he does get unfairly dinged on that thing. And he terrorized Daniel Jones for his entire career, and it's. But if we're being, Shane, you have a very good point. Why is one player over the room? He is the best player on the screen from what's been proven, what's been put on tape. But I just think we've got the best room by far, and that overweighs the difference between that number one player edge.
What's your ranking then, Shane?
Yeah, so for me, I've got Washington at 4. Von Miller's, I think he's past it. In all honesty, I think he's kind of. I think he's signed with Washington in the hope that, he's seen they've got that quarterback now, where maybe there's a little bit of a chance at a push a ring potentially, and I think that's probably why he's gone there. It's probably the best opportunity getting a ring in terms of what teams were offering him a contract. I don't think much of their depth chart, in all honesty, behind that. Number 3, I've got the Eagles. I think Nolan Smith's pretty solid player, but nothing spectacular. Aziz, we know, like you said, the key is going to be keeping him fit. You probably bank on him playing all 17 games this season, in all honesty. And then I've got the Cowboys at 2 and the Giants at 1. But I'll probably have the Giants and Cowboys a lot closer than many people do, for the simple being that, Cowboys have got the best pass rushing in this conference for me right now. Brian Burns is good, but I don't think he's as good as Parsons. Carter's a projection. Thibodeau's been hit and miss. He seems to kind of have up and down games. You see him for a game and then you don't see him for 3 more games. But I do just have the Giants better because, my argument with not having Giants and Dexter at number 1 is the depth wasn't great behind Dexter. I've not got Cowboys at number 1 because the depth behind Parsons is not great. Like Craig said, as a Rocco's a projection, a little bit like Carter, but obviously Carter was the number 3 overall pick for a reason and was a high projection based on what he did at college compared to as a Rocco. I do think Dante Fowler could potentially be a bit of a shrewd pickup. Had a good year last year at Washington, and kind of after that he's kind of had somewhere between, say, 4 to 7 sacks on average a year. So that's the only reason the Cowboys aren't at number 1 is because I just don't think the depth behind the main guy is as good as the depth behind the Giants.
So we've all got the Eagles in the bottom 2. I mean, I've put them bottom. Obviously, you two have put the Commanders under them. This is the first time then that we can say that the Eagles quite clearly do have a weakness in the defense. And it won't just be this potentially for us, but is this kind of why do you think that the Eagles are still projected to be such a good overall unit?
What, defensive unit or as a?
So they're still the defensive front is still spoken up as being probably one of the better ones in the league, but we've ranked them second. I've got them last here. You've got them third. I mean, linebackers we're going to come into in a minute, but do you think we're underestimating them, or do you think that it's just kind of an on paper kind of thing?
Yeah, I think you. So they obviously get a little bit of credit from being, the defending champions and being there or thereabouts over the last couple of years. They're probably a fringe top 10 front still. But they are relying on second and third year players stepping up. where they've had losses. But they haven't seemed to have an issue in finding those next guys. Whether, a couple of years ago it was like, oh, their O line's finish, and they pull out a tackle out of Australia, like it's they do seem to find a way to things. So until they prove you not up to it, you'd struggle to bet against them. So I think when it's when it's close, it's easier to give them the nod. I do think though they're a fringe top 10, a fringe top 10 front. I think we're a top 5 front.
Interesting. Shane, I'll come to you a bit later when we maybe have a look at the defensive rankings as a whole. Maybe I'll expand on that a bit later. Just before we move on, James has it ranked as Cowgirls, Giants, Eagles, Commanders, assuming that Miller is wash and then Parsons being pure filth. If we get anywhere close to the production we hope from Carter, then we're number 1. Chris says Giants, Eagles, Cowboys, and Commies, and then Holty, Giants, Cowboys, Eagles, and then Washington. So it seems like everyone is pretty low on that Washington edge rusher front. We'll move on to linebackers then. So the Giants have Bobby Okereke, Micah McFadden, Darius Musow, and Chris Board as their main 4 on the depth chart. Eagles, Zach Bourne, Nakobe Dean, Jihad Campbell, and Jeremiah Trotter Jr. Cowboys, DeMarvion Overshone, Kenneth Murray Jr., Jack Sanborn, and Marius Lufau. And then Commanders have Bobby Wagner, Frankie Luvu, Jordan McGee, and Kane Medrand. I'm up first on this one. I'll go from 4 to 1. I think it's a little bit more fun. Well done, Aaron. Found the right format here. I've got the Cowboys at 4. Kendrick's leaving is a big loss, and then Overshone's actually going to miss time due to tearing multiple ligaments last season. So although he might be number 1 on the depth chart, he's not going to be seen until late in the season at the very best. I think that leaves them with no star power on the field and not even a great player on the field. Murray's hit and miss. Sanborn is solid, but he's a journeyman. He's never really stuck anywhere. Leofau could break through, but was exposed in coverage in his rookie year, so there's improvements needed there. I then got the Eagles at 3. I think Zach Bourne was a breakout star last season, but that could be an anomaly. Bobby Okereke was very good for us in his first season with us and then fell off. That can happen. My biggest problem outside of this is injury. Nakobe Dean's good, but he's been quite injury prone since he's come into the league. Jihad Campbell is a rookie with high upside, but we don't really know what we're getting there. Trotter, physical, fast, but lacks experience. The Giants I've got at number 2. I think it's a solid unit that can't be classified as elite, but is definitely good. The problem with trying to call them elite is there's too many wrinkles for me. Okereke's tackling monster, but struggled with injuries and consistency last year. McFadden's developing, but could lead if needed, but maybe not in the same way. Musau's kind of a bit under the radar, the same as maybe Deontay Johnson, who's not listed here. I think that they could excel if they continue their development. Chris Board's really hard to put in this list because I think he's a very good special teamer, but we're not talking about special teamers. And then number 1, I've got the Commanders. Wagner and Luvu are just among the best duo linebackers in the league. They're very, very good, even if Wagner is slowing down a little bit, coming towards the end of his career. Their depth is a little shaky, but I just think on the surface of it, they have the best starting duo out of all of them. And it's not really close for me. Shane, what's your 4 to 1 looking like for linebackers? Because we spoke about this, and this was one of the tougher ones, I think.
Yeah, I think this is the one that I stood out, kind of said was probably the toughest one for me. So at number 4, I've got the Dallas Cowboys. You know, DeMarvin I was shown. I liked him coming out of college, but like you say, it's him that's had the injury in it now. The
ACL.
operation.
Yeah.
So,
Multiple ligaments. So he won't be
yeah,
back on the field until November at the earliest.
yeah,
if at
exactly.
all.
And behind him, you got Kenneth Murray Jr. Was never lived up to that Rain One talent that he had invested in him by the Chargers about 4 or 5 years ago. And then kind of their depth behind them, like I say, it's just kind of journeyman kind of players. At number 3, I've got the Commanders. You know, Wagner and Louvu are pretty solid players, but you know, a bit like we've mentioned with Miller and with a couple of other players, age is starting to catch up now. And you know, he's had a solid career, absolutely outstanding career. He's going to be a Hall of Famer one day, without doubt. But I just think, you know, kind of time's going to catch up with him at some point. And like me and Aaron were talking about with Louvu before we went on air, it depends kind of how they use Louvu. You know, some of his best footballers come at middle linebacker, but he is utilised in other ways, not just as a pure off-ball linebacker. At number 2, sorry, excuse me, I've gone for the New York Giants. Once again, you know, you got Bobby O, you got McFadden. There's still questions there for me with McFadden, in all honesty. I think he's still got a lot of areas he needs to improve on. The fact he's potentially going to be our most successful draft pick from that draft year kind of signifies how poor that draft class was, in my opinion. I like Darius Musau, but you know, can he do it in a full-time kind of role? He could potentially kind of have a Michael McFadden type career where he might get thrust into the starting position, but is he really going to be lighting it up? More than likely not. And then at number 1, I've got the Eagles. I think Zach Bourne had an outstanding year last year, was an absolutely amazing pick up by the Eagles, and they just always seem to do this: pick someone up in free agency and turn them into like a superstar over the course of the season. Nakobe Dean, I did like coming out of college. You mentioned the injury problems, but that's one of the reasons why he fell to where he did. And last year he had a great season, to be honest with you. I think it was like 128, 130 tackles throughout the year. So, you know, he's going to be hoping that those injury problems are behind him and he can kind of build up from that now. And then, you know, Jihad Campbell this year was LB2, I think, for myself. And then Jeremiah Trotter from Clemson a couple of years ago as well was a pretty solid. I think he might have been in my top 5 as well. So that's why I've got Eagles number 1, because for me, you know, they've got the 2 starters and they've got good depth behind them.
Aaron, who is on mute?
I was just pondering whether to get the train out of the state. Not a very big diversion here, but it's kind of come up in that. And I think James says it in there as well about the questions over Bobby Owen and McFadden. What is it about McFadden that has you questioning his kind of ability or his credibility there as a really good or great starter in the league, Shane?
I just don't rate him as a linebacker, in all honesty. You know, there's a reason why he comes off the field a lot in third downs. I think he's got better over the years since we've drafted him, but I still think he has a few too many missed tackles for what I would like from the linebacker position. And that's one of the reasons why I feel like every kind of year I've been saying I'd like us to draft a solid linebacker 2 to get next to him. You know, if McFadden gets an extension with the Giants, is it going to be anything, you know, groundbreaking? I don't think it will be. I think I'd be amazed if he signs for anything over $6 million a year.
Yeah, I find him a frustrating watch. I think obviously his missed tackles are a problem, but a lot of his missed tackles are in the backfield, and you know, he's kind of a leader in tackle for loss, and he does have an eye of how to kind of diagnose a play pre-snap or on the snap and sneak into the backfield. He's just not able always to finish. And I think that's, if he could add that to his game, he really would be an elite kind of, certainly first and second down linebacker at least, you know, 2 down linebacker, which does have some limitations in salary, obviously, if you're not a full 3 down guy. But he does have that. I don't think you can learn that talent. I think it's a bit like being a guy that gets off the ball quickly. You can practice it and get better at it, but the guys that are really elite at it just have something else. And I think he's got that, but maybe doesn't have the full physicality or something to get to get his things. But yeah, he's for me is the key in this in our and I'll go on to our rankings now, but he's the key on where you place the Giants in this rankings. And so I have the Cowboys for I think we're all fairly consistent on that. And then I have the Giants at 3. But I can see a world where I rank the Giants 1. I think this is the hardest kind of split between the 3 teams. I have the Eagles at 2, but again, I can see the Eagles being 1 or 2. I don't see them necessarily as 3. And again, for me, the Commanders are 1. You've got Bobby Wagner, who's 34. Didn't really look like he'd slowed down last season at all. Had a really, made the Pro Bowl. Maybe, some of that was star power, name power gets him over the line, but it's not one that you go, how on earth has he made it? Luvu, I think, is a fantastic kind of all-round linebacker. Gets used as on the blitz a lot, and they use a blitz-heavy scheme. So when we talked about them having the worst edge rushers, there's some of the ways they get around that is how they use Frankie Luvu. But as Shane says, are they taking away from some of his true middle linebacker ability to do that? But I think they are the kind of best linebacker core. I think the Eagles. I think they've got some young guys that are showing lots of improvement. And if you ask us to do this at the end of the season, I can see a way that there'll be a standout one of this group. They've got the ceiling, but probably the lowest floor of those 3 as a group. And I think the one thing that does worry me about the Commanders, and I think it's probably worth talking about it now. Do you realise how easy a schedule they had at the back half of last season? So let me take you through who their quarterback schedule was last season. So they played a benched Daniel Jones twice. They played a bad Deshaun Watson. They played a benched Andy Dalton. They played a rookie Caleb Williams. They played a backup Cooper Rush. They played a backup Will Levis. They played in the same game backups Jake Hayner and Spencer Rattler. They played a rookie Michael Penix Jr. They played a backup Kenny Pickett, and they played a backup Trey Lance. So from weeks 12 through to 18, they faced Rush, Levis, Hayner, Rattler, Pickett, Penix, and Lance. Now, if you go against those quarterbacks, how do you not have the number 1 defense, right? And their defense just looked okay. I think they only won one of those games by more than 6 points with the super high-powered offense and the rookie quarterback and everything else that they were having. So I do feel like, and maybe this is something I'll keep in my back pocket for next week, but I do think that it's easy to overrank the performance of this linebacker core and this defense as a whole. And I do think, as we talked about on their front 7, they have lost some players from that front 7. So it's, I think maybe there's an argument that they've got the best linebackers, but certainly as a front 7, I think there's an argument that them and the Cowboys are weak, particularly against the run.
Fair enough. I mean, we're all unanimous that the Cowboys linebacker room is pretty poor, but I think we're also all in agreement that there is very little separating those next 3 teams between them, because there's not a standout. I think is the fair thing to say. Looking at the chat are the same. James, Commanders, Eagles, Giants, Cowboys. Holty, Eagles, Giants, Washington, Dallas. I think Chris also did his Giants, Commies, Eagles, Cowboys. So, it's just in amongst in sort of, it's very similar between the lot of them. There have been other conversations in there. The problem with the Commanders is depth, Chris said. Obviously, we spoke about what James was saying. I think there's a lot of conversation about how obviously the Giants had a new DC last year, and that doesn't help sometimes. Sometimes you need to get to year 2 to really understand the scheme. And Bobby is one of those kind of players who openly said that Right, safeties. Giants, Tyler Nubin, Javon Holland, Dane Belton, Kevon Wallace, the newly signed. Eagles, Reed Blankenship, Sidney Brown, Andrew Makuba, Tristan McCollum. Cowboys, Malik Hooker, Donovan Wilson, Israel. Bloody hell, those two names are very close to each other, stacked one on top of the other. Israel Makamu, Wayne Thomas. Commanders have Will Harris, Quan Martin, Percy Butler, Jeremy Reeves. Shane, you are first on the safety train from 4-1, please, my friend.
Yeah, so I was going to read through them, then I'll just explain some of the thinking. So at number 4, I've got Washington. 3, I've got Dallas. 2, I went for the Eagles, and at number 1, I got the Giants. The reason I had the Giants at number 1 is that these could have kind of been interchanged at least 1 to 3, if not definitely 1 to 2 for me. I think Tyler Nubin's got some questions. He's a great run stopper, but he needs to improve his pass defense, and you kind of want to see him step forward this year. I mean, especially when you drafted him last year and he brought the interceptions record up Minnesota at college. You thought that maybe the pass defense would be a stronger element of his game, but for me, I think the run game really stood out, but he just needs to improve in the pass area. Signing of Javon Holland into a bit of a projection. Obviously, former first round talent out of Oregon, player who I was really high on when he come into the league. Kind of found himself in free agency. He's not really hit the heights that he probably would have wanted to. But I just think those two, as a safety 1, safety 2, are probably better than any other safety 1, safety 2 on the graphic. And then obviously with a backup in Dane Belton, a guy who, a little bit of the opposite of Tyler Nubin, who does seem to be a bit of a ball hawk at this level, who at least, twice a season seems to turn the ball off, whether that be an interception or fumbling it or fumbling recovery. Eagles, Reed Blankenship and Sidney Brown. That's a solid 1 and 2, but I think that our 1-2 is kind of better than theirs. With the Cowboys and Malik Hooker, he's a player I've never really been as high on as what some people have been. And Donovan Wilson, again, the Cowboys for me have a very weak safety group compared to the rest of their defense. And then with the Commanders, Will Harris and Quan Martin. I think Will Harris is a solid safety, but there's questions with Quan Martin and the depth behind him in Butler and Reeves as well. So that's why I had them placed at 4.
Aaron, you are up next.
Yeah, so I went Commanders at 4. Again, I think I'm trying to think who they lost. They had the guy who took the most snaps for them last season at safety. They lost
Chin.
Yeah, Jeremy Chin. Yeah, so they've had a big kind of loss there. Obviously, they brought in some replacement, but it's all unproven. Cowboys at 3 again. I actually like some of their guys here, but their whole defense is no one that I really want on my team apart from Parsons. But so I have them at 3. I'm going to break tradition, so I can say I've got Eagles 1, Giants 2, just because we won the match, and I'll have to say it that way around. But yeah, Giants 2. I actually think we've got a really solid unit. We've got to see some growth from it. We've got to see Javon Holland bed in, our new number 8. Hopefully he's better for us than the previous number 8. And Eagles, I think the one thing you've got to factor in here is whether Cooper DeJean's going to step in at safety at any point, because as he was a standout at corner and kind of safety, and he obviously did a bit of punt return. He's kind of one of these guys that you could go either way. If he plays safety, then I think they definitely push it over the 1. You could then argue that you might need to rank them slightly lower on corner because they're a bit thinner at corner, I would say. So, but how you get your best, I think we've got the same. We talked about it when we talked about our secondary episode a couple of weeks ago, is how you get your best 5 guys on the field. And does that mean you play 3 safeties or 2 safeties or 1 safety and 4, that mix of guys that you put on the field and your scheme will dictate how you get it there. I just think probably the champions' advantage to the Eagles, just to push them at 1/2. But again, this was a very hard group to split.
We have our first complete identical ranking of the day, and I am aligned with Shane on this one because I have Commanders 4, Cowboys 3, Eagles 2, and Giants 1. The Commanders just lack a playmaker because of Chin going. Harris is solid, Martin's developing but isn't exciting. And then they've got a lot of special teams value below that, and that's not going to help if they end up getting an injury or one of the players just doesn't play well, because you can't really do much about it. Hooker, I think, is reliable and getting better, but he's not quite as good as the other two sort of number ones there. Wilson has 3 straight seasons with 80 tackles. I think that's really impressive, but Thomas and Makamu are both bit part players. There's no real tape on how they're going to do if they're kind of thrust in there. Eagles at 2 is because of the fact that I don't think that Blankenship and Brown have as good a relationship as Blankenship and Gardner-Johnson had. I think those two together would have easily been number 1 in this ranking, but with Gardner-Johnson going and Sidney Brown being the kind of replacement, I just don't think that they'll have the same sort of chemistry or the same sort of impact. They also have is it Lewis Sine, who's a bit further down on the depth chart. I quite like Lewis Sine. I thought he was very good a few seasons ago. I saw him at Wembley or Tottenham. No, I think it was at Tottenham because he was drafted by I want to say he was drafted by the Bengals.
Jags, I was thinking.
Is it Jags?
Something
No, I think you might be right there, Shane. But I thought he was really good as a rookie, and I just feel like he just needs to. He could kick on. The Giants have got at number 1.
Vikings, sorry.
Vikings, yes. It was Saints Vikings, and Sine broke his leg on the field at Wembley, or Tottenham. Sorry, at Tottenham he broke his leg, and I thought he was really good in that game up until that point. So it'd be interesting to see if he can sort of kick on and get back to that. And then the Giants at 1. I feel like we have the strongest spine there. So you have the 1, 2, and then the 3. I think we're the only team with a 3 where you could turn around and say he's pretty good. Nubin, like as Shane said, was okay. It was good in areas, but difficult and challenging in other areas, and wasn't quite what we'd hoped. But he is coming off of an injury and hopefully can be better. I don't think Nubin was helped by his partner last year. And I think that having someone like Javon Holland will actually bring the best out of Nubin this year. So that's why I have them up there. James has said he'll probably go Eagles, Giants, Cowboys, Commanders on the basis that Holland recovers the form of pre-last season. And also he's not sold on Nubin yet. Need a lot more from him. I don't think he had a single interception last year, did he, Nubin? So... and then we're on to the last one, into the cornerbacks. The Giants have Paulson Adebo, Deontay Banks, Drew Phillips, Cordell Flott, and then Trey Hawkins. Eagles, Keely Ringo, Cooper DeJean, Quinion Mitchell, Eli Ricks, Adoree Jackson. Cowboys, Trayvon Diggs, Khair Elam, Deron Bland, Shavon Revel Jr., and Kalen Carson. And then the Commanders, Jonathan Jones, Marshawn Lattimore, Mike St. Strill, Trey Amos, and Kevon Seymour. Aaron, you are up first, my friend.
Yeah, so I'm going Cowboys 4, and part of it is Trayvon Diggs is not expected to be ready for the start of the season. I think he had surgery back in January, and without him in that mix, I think it's a weaker group. obviously Revel Jr. was, I think he was a 3rd round pick, and I probably would have gone higher if it wasn't for some sort of injuries concerns around him as well. But I think there's an argument you can put them higher, but I had them at 4. I've gone Giants at 3, and I think again I've kind of gone with I think they have the widest range of outcomes as a unit. I think if it all clicks and it all goes well, it could be a really strong unit. Maybe not as strong as my number 1 team, but I think it could go really well, and we could see a big step forward from this unit. I have the Commanders at 2, and I think again there's an argument that these could be better, but I think obviously they didn't really get a lot out of Lattimore after the trade last year through injury. But adding kind of explain that San Ristil, how do you say his name?
Sandstrill.
Sandstrill. So I was out of Michigan, or am I right? Yeah. Last year. So I think I like him. I think he's decent, and I think they got some decent play out of him. So I think I like that group quite a lot. I think it's a young group, a bit like kind of how we were a couple of years ago, with a veteran in there and some young guys around it, and it could go either way. But I think I've got them at 2, and then I've got the Eagles at 1, and now they obviously lost Darius Slay, Isaiah Rodgers, and Devontae Maddox out of that group, but the 2 kind of rookie sensations in Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell, I think it was almost criminal that the rest of the league let these guys fall to the Eagles where they did in the draft last year. I think they were 2nd and 4th in defensive rookie of the year kind of voting. Ringo, I think, has been on the team for a couple of years as well, so it's quite a young, another young group, but the 2 standout players there in I think, and obviously they've added Adoree Jackson, who we know is, would walk into a competition to start in our team. So if he's their 4th guy, or maybe you're playing Cooper DeJean at safety and you're playing more Adoree Jackson, or how you're working out your slot and things like that. I think there's some challenge there, but yeah, I think of the group, if I had DeJean and Mitchell, or either of them instead of Deontay Banks right now, I'd feel a lot better about our group.
Yeah, I have them the exact same, actually. Cowboys 4, Giants 3, Commanders 2, Eagles 1. The Cowboys is all down to availability. As you said, Diggs is on the PUP list because he's got cartilage damage in the same knee he tore his ACL in 2023. Bland missed 11 games at the beginning of last season, and when he came back wasn't amazing, so we don't know how he's going to do. Elam isn't a starter for me. I don't think he's a locked-in starter. Rafael Jr. hasn't practiced because of an undisclosed injury. Carson's coming off of a shoulder injury last season. Like, could you have any more potential holes in your cornerback room than what the Cowboys have? The Giants I have at 3 because I think Debo will improve this unit massively, and I think Drew Phillips, if he continues his trajectory, we're on to a winner at slot cornerback there, which I think is actually becoming a very important position for a lot of teams. My biggest problem is that question mark over Deontay Banks. If he beats Flott easily in camp, or if Flott beats him easily in camp, I think we'd be okay. But if they get embroiled in a battle where neither of them are actually really standing out for good reasons, I think that's a big, big negative for our chances. Commanders, I'll get Jonathan Jones out of the way straight away. I'm not as big on Jones as a lot of people seem to be. A lot of people seem to laud Jonathan Jones. I think he's hit and miss. And last season, he allowed a 75% reception rate, which I don't think is a good number for a cornerback, especially a cornerback who is going to be a starter. The big thing for me is Marshawn Lattimore is a proven CB1. He might be getting slightly older, but he's still a proven CB1. And I think more settled into the team after being traded from the Saints last year. I think he'll be happy. And I really, really rate Saint Stroh. I think he's an outstanding nickel corner. I really do. The Eagles pip it for me, though, because Cooper DeJean and Quinion Mitchell. Keely Ringo and Adoree Jackson are another two hit and miss players. And I do think that that's a question mark for them. But I just think when you can pin your season on two rookies who, as Aaron said, were like second and fourth in Defensive Rookie of the Year, both coming off stellar seasons where they both contributed in a Super Bowl win, I don't see how you can't have those as top. Is it a full house, Shane? It's not a full house. It's not a full house.
So I've gone Commanders at 4. I think for me, kind of, like you said, Jonathan Jones. If it was a Jonathan Jones from sort of 3 or 4 years ago, then yeah, okay, fair enough. Concerned with Marshawn Lattimore, he's aging to an extent, and that feels mental to say for someone who I think he's 29 years old. But for me, it's the injury issues. I don't think he's played more than 10 games in the last 3 or 4 years. He only played in 2 games when he went to Washington last year. And on top of that, I've got concerns about Washington's DB room. It wasn't great last year at all. They brought Jones in free agency, but I'm just mindful that, a guy that doesn't know the system as well, already for a DB room that weren't great. So that's why I got them at 4. 3, I went with the New York Giants. Again, Paulson Adebo's coming off this injury. You hope that he's okay, but Deontay Banks right now doesn't look overly promising. Cordell Flotter's kind of been hit and miss up and down. He's one of them. He'll do something good in one game and then kind of give up silly passes really for like the next 3 or 4 games. And then Drew Phillips, kind of sit all and Ubin for me for Drew Phillips. I think that he had a good rookie year without a doubt. Love him as a run defender. Love him seeing blitzing. He was sent on a blitzes a few times, and that man sent it. Like, he went there to hurt people. And let's not forget, this is a player who had that. Was it just a fumble or the fumble recovery in week 1 against Minnesota? I can't remember which one it was.
He had an interception, didn't he?
Was it an interception?
Yeah.
I thought it was a fumble or fumble recovery. Either way, he was physical with what. I remember him making the play, and I was like, this is a physical player. But I just want to see him again improving that kind of pass coverage area. I don't know why my iPad's zooming me in and out like that. I have no idea. I'm not touching it.
I think you're right. I think you're right. Actually, I think it was a fumble because I think that the interception was Darius Musil.
Yeah, but either way, he made a play on that week 1 that kind of made me think this is a physical player, and I think that was one of the first things that Shane and Dable was saying last year when they drafted him. That one of the appeals with Drew is that he's a physical player. Number 2, I went with the Cowboys. Now, this was a bit of a tough one, really, because I don't rate Kaiir Elam. Deontay Banks, he's on the trajectory of a Kaiir Elam career. And what I mean by that is that Elam was drafted by the Bills late in round 1, and he's on course to be a bit of a journeyman. And Deontay Banks has a serious risk of the same career path for him if he can't get it together this year. And, you genuinely hope he does. But, although Trayvon Diggs isn't the next coming like Dallas fans do think so, I will give him a little bit of credit. He does know ball, to be fair. And then, they drafted Siobhan Revel Jr., who I was a massive fan of. I think I had him at CB4 or CB5 in my rankings. Like Mayo said, if he hadn't had that ACL injury in September last year, I think he could have been a genuine round 1 talent. I think the Cowboys have potentially got a steal there. But number 1, I don't think you can look past Eagles. They took my CB1 and CB2 last year in the draft in the first 2 rounds. Like you say, Keely Ringo's not bad as a rotational piece. He has some good games, he has some bad games, but if he was on our roster at the minute, I think there'd be no doubt he'd comfortably be CB2 right now. So that's the reason I've got the Eagles at 1.
I think you can sum all of this up by the fact that the defense is probably not as clear as the offense was. The offense was very easy to kind of go, yep, the Eagles are number one, and the other three kind of just trade off against each other. I think there's a lot more disparity in the defensive side of things. Going back to what I was kind of talking about earlier, Shane, as an overall defensive unit, and I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, where would you rank the four as an overall? Because I tried doing this, I found this real tough.
I mean, if I try and put some logic on it, I had the Eagles at the number one spot 3 times and had the Giants at the number one spot twice. So I think I'll be inclined to go somewhat similar to that with the Eagles at the number one spot for me. I'm just looking at my rankings now, so I've got to base it on that basically. But I'd kind of have... I think I probably would put Giants at 2. For me, Eagles are number 1, 2, 3, 4. I think you could make arguments either way, but I'm going to pick. I'll have the Giants at 2. At 3, I'm probably going to get Dallas, and at 4, I'd have Washington. The reasons for that is that I think Philly, apart from probably safety, have got really solid players at each position, starting wise. I'd have us at 2. We've got the best defensive tackle, maybe even the best defensive player in football at the minute. Number 3, Dallas have got that leader in Micah Parsons, that disruptor. You don't win football games if you can't get to the quarterback, and that's why I'd have Dallas at number 3. And then number 4, I'd have Washington. I think they've got a couple of nice players, but there's not many players I look at on that Washington defense and say I'd love them on my team. Whereas 3 or 4 years ago, when they had absolutely ridiculous depth on the defensive line, when they had like Deron Payne, they had Jonathan Allen, they had Chase Young, they had Sweat. They had players that we envied at times. To be honest with you, we were dreading playing that front 4. So I'd have Washington at 4.
Aaron, how does yours differ?
Yeah, so I think on a talent basis, I'd have it exactly the same as Shane. So Eagles 1, Giants 2, Cowboys 3, Commanders 4. I think the thing that has propped up the Cowboys defense over the last few years is just their ability to get turnovers, and that's something that we haven't done. So if you could, as a defense, can get those turnovers, I think they've been like plus 10 for like 3 years in a row. I think maybe last year they had a bit of regression, but they were very turnover driven defense. So if they can retain that kind of ball hawk, be a pirate, I think is the term flown around Giants camp about getting hold of the ball, and if that could really separate those teams. There's not a lot between the Giants and Cowboys as a overall defense, but you could see wildly different outcomes if the Giants sack totals and if you get sack, strip, fumble, get a couple of short fields, give their offense a real leg up. And wouldn't it be great to be coming out of the fourth quarter with like a 21-point lead like they had against us a couple of years ago? Like that kind of explosiveness can have a difference in the middle. I think the Commanders are setting up to have a season a bit like the Bengals did last year, when every game finish over 60 points and lots of scoring, and you can't stop us and we can't stop you, and we'll keep scoring through to the end. Eagles, it's interesting because so many of their games were kind of like control. When you've got a strong running game like the Eagles have, you can wear on opponents and wear them down and actually make it easier for your defense. So if the offense stays as destructive as as it was last season, their defense doesn't even get challenged because the team is playing, opposing team is playing from so far behind that it kind of forces them to look at a deep passing game, which goes against the Eagles' strength. If a team can get a lead on the Eagles and run the ball against them, and it will really change how we view that defense. But on a pure talent and where we are, I think probably Eagles 1, Giants 2, Cowboys 3, Commanders 4.
I think it's safe to say for me that if the Cowboys didn't have Micah Parsons, they would be bottom of this list and by a country mile. My rankings do not favour them at all. I think their biggest battle this year will be against injuries, and if they can get players back. I think they have holes all over their roster at the moment due to different injuries, and if the players that come in to sort of plug the gaps really don't work for them, I think they're really going to struggle. But I think apart from that, I totally agree. I think the biggest problem is with the Eagles is until you beat them, you can't not have them at number one. You know, they're literally they're literally the ones to beat, and we haven't been able to do it in meaningful games. And they still have good players and really good players at certain levels. You know, like we all had them at cornerback 1 for a reason. They've got 2 studs there. It's just whether losing CJ Gardner-Johnson makes a difference at safety. It's whether, you know, having turnover at edge rusher is going to hurt them at defensive. You know, it's up front that potentially you could take advantage. But they do have, it's Vic Fangio, isn't it, their defensive coordinator at the Eagles. Somehow he just does it. I think that almost gives them an extra prop by itself, just having Fangio as a defensive coordinator. You know, we've got Bowen. Cowboys have got Eberflus, which might not be a great match in itself, and that could cause some issues. So, but there we have it. That's both done, offense and defense. And unfortunately, that is all we have time for this week. We are all now excited. I think it's fair to say that for the end of the boring part of the off season, and now we actually get into the proper off season, or the pre-season, as we can kind of call it now, where we can obviously find out if our new signings have got what it takes to take on real opponents, a little bit like us here on Big Blue UK and Ireland, where all being well, and logistically we can get it working, our new off-season signing, Aaron, will be going head-to-head with 3 NFC East opponents of his own, as we hopefully, I think welcome's the wrong word, as we invite a member of the Commanders, Cowboys and Eagles UK content creator family.
I think tolerate would be a better word.
Tolerate, yeah, we'll tolerate having them on the podcast for a round table hosted by yours truly. So Aaron might have boxing gloves on next week, or, you know, mouth guard, head protection, whatever else is needed. Other than that, anything to add before we go, boys?
No, it's been good doing these episodes. I think you said before we went out, kind of, obviously you've got the round table next week, but after that, I think this is our last kind of non-joint game podcast episode, is it? Every episode after next week's round table, we've got Giants football to talk about in some capacity. So, you know, looking forward to that. Looking forward to seeing kind of the rookies on the field, and you never get to see everything in pre-season, but hey, it's football, and that's the main thing. And yeah, you know, just remember next week, it's our fucking podcast, not theirs. They ain't guests. We're tolerating them. Kick asses and take names later.
Thanks for the advice, Shane. I'll bring that fighting talk with me. I've enjoyed the off season. Obviously, all the player analysis and the roster analysis and the breakdowns. There's been some fun episodes, but yeah, I'm excited to watch some games and break those down. So yeah, happy to move from player analysis and into on the field analysis for the on the podcast for the first season for me. So yeah, rookie is raring to go.
Yeah, it's the off season is always fun because you're trying to come up with new and fun ways to try and get the information across without it being monotonous and boring. And we hope we've done that across the off season and kind of helped you through the quiet period of the NFL season. Obviously, bear in mind that once we get to the week commencing September 8th, so that is the week after the season opener, we're on twice a week again. So it's going to start coming, pretty thick and fast, to be honest. And we're going to be going through the season, and the weeks always get quicker when you've got 2 podcasts a week and then the games. It goes through very, very quickly. So thanks for sticking with us through the quiet period, and get ready for it to be busy as always. Remember to like this video, subscribe to us on YouTube. You can hit the bell to be notified when we go live. If you aren't already, follow us on the podcast socials at the bottom of this video or in the links in the audio podcast. And while you're doing that, rate us on the podcast platform of choice. 5 stars. Thank you very much. My thanks go to Shane and to Aaron for joining me. All of you watching and listening, we're signing off until next time. Let's go Giants.